What happens when two young men try to rob a black woman walking her dog on a quiet street? They never imagined who she really was. What happened next left the whole block in stunned silence. Before we begin the story, write in the comments where you are watching us from. People think walking a dog is a peaceful thing. Fresh air, wagging tails, neighbors nodding while sipping cheap coffee that tastes like cardboard. That's how they picture it. But let me tell you, when you're a black woman with a big golden dog named Jet, and you've seen more sunrises in service than most folks see in a year, you walk different. You watch everything, every parked car, every shadow that moves too fast. You walk ready. That morning, Jet was in his usual business, sniffing bushes with the enthusiasm of a toddler finding a cookie jar, while I was dropping off a grocery bag for Miss Lewis down the street. Miss Lewis, sweet old thing, still thinks canned soup and stale bread are a meal, and if I didn't check on her, no one would. I knocked, heard her shuffle to the door, and the moment I saw her smile, my day felt lighter. She called Jet the lion, and Jet gave her that goofy look he saves for folks who smell like cookies and warmth. I left with a piece of banana bread in my hand, thinking maybe this world still had small bits of kindness left in it. Jet and I turned down Maple Street, where the cracked sidewalks tell stories of folks who've tripped and cursed them for decades. And I saw them. Two young men leaning against a graffiti-tagged wall, eyes sliding over me like I was another easy target they could check off before lunch. One nudged the other, and I felt it before they moved, the way predators shift when they decide it's time. Jet stopped, ears forward, muscles tight. I squeezed the leash, felt the weight of his trust and his quiet readiness. "Morning," I said, keeping my voice calm. My granddaddy always told me, "Never give them your fear." They didn't say a word, just stepped in front of me, blocking the sidewalk like they owned it. One was tall, lanky, with a smile that was too quick, too sharp. The other was shorter, eyes darting like he was waiting for someone to stop them. "You look like you can help us out," the tall one finally said, stepping closer, his shoes scraping against the pavement. Jet let out a low growl, the kind that rumbles from his chest and makes your bones remember you're alive. I kept my hand on his collar, felt his energy pulsing through me. I chuckled. "You boys sure you want to do this today?" The tall one laughed like it was a joke, but it wasn't. His hand shot out, grabbing at my wrist, trying to snatch the bag I was carrying. Jet barked, loud enough to make a car alarm start screaming down the block. "Whoa, whoa, lady, control your mutt!" the shorter one yelled, backing up a step, but not leaving. I looked him dead in the eye. "You might want to think real hard before you take another step." They didn't. That's the thing about people who see a black woman and think she's weak. They think the dog is the problem. They don't know the woman holding the leash is a bigger problem. He tried to jerk the bag from me again, and for a second, the street felt too quiet. The banana bread slipped from my hand and hit the sidewalk, crumbs scattering like tiny witnesses to a moment that shifted everything. "Don't make this worse," the tall one hissed, his hand tightening. Jet barked again, lunging, teeth bared, and I held him back, my muscles burning with the effort. The shorter one flinched, looking around, but no one came. No one ever does. I felt anger boiling in my chest, the kind that comes when you're tired of folks testing you just because of your skin, your gender, your quiet way of walking through this world. My eyes narrowed, and I let out a breath. "You picked the wrong day," I said, my voice low. The tall one smirked, leaning in, thinking he had control, thinking I was scared. And that's when Jet's bark cut through everything, echoing off the walls, loud enough to make them both pause. You see, they thought they were robbing a quiet black woman with a dog. They didn't know who I was, what I'd seen, what I'd done, and what I was willing to do to protect myself and my dog on a cracked sidewalk in the middle of a city that forgets people like me every day. They didn't know yet. What happened next changed everything. You do not want to miss how this unfolds. Funny thing about trouble, it never checks your schedule. You can be walking home with your dog, thinking about heating up leftover stew, and it will still find you. Right there on that cracked sidewalk, with Jet's leash wrapped around my wrist and those two fools blocking my way, trouble found me again. Jet's bark was still echoing when the tall one decided to prove himself. He lunged, thinking I would freeze, that I would be too afraid to move. Let me tell you something. Fear is a choice, and I wasn't in the mood to choose it. I stepped back, letting his hand miss, and he stumbled forward, catching himself on the edge of the curb. His friend's eyes got wide, but he tried to play it cool, shifting from one foot to the other, trying to look tough. You could see it in his face. He wasn't ready for this to get real. "Lady, just give it up, all right?" The shorter one snapped, his voice cracking just enough to betray him. "No one needs to get hurt." I raised an eyebrow, feeling Jet pull at the leash, ready to jump if I let him. "Funny," I said. "You say that after trying to take what isn't yours." The tall one turned, face flushed, and rushed at me again. But this time, I didn't step back. My hand shot up, grabbed his wrist, twisted it just enough to make him yelp, and stepped aside so he fell to his knees on the wet pavement. His friend cursed under his breath, looking around, but no one was coming. Not a single person peeked out of the shops. They all turned away, pretending they didn't see. That's the thing about this city. It will watch a black woman get robbed in broad daylight and pretend it has somewhere else to be. Jet barked again, and I felt his energy surge through me, reminding me of all the mornings I spent running drills, all the nights spent guarding my squad when the world felt like it was on fire. These two? They didn't know any of that. They didn't know I was trained to stay calm when others panicked. "You don't want to do this," I warned, keeping my eyes on the shorter one as he shifted from foot to foot, sweat dripping down his temple despite the cool air. He pulled something out of his pocket, a cheap metal object glinting under the streetlight. "Back off, lady." Jet's growl was low and steady. My grip on the leash tightened. I took a breath, slow and steady, letting every sound sink in. The cars in the distance, the hum of the city, Jet's steady breathing, the tremble in that young man's voice. "You sure about that?" I asked, tilting my head. "Because you're not just dealing with me. You're dealing with him too." I nodded toward Jet, who was now standing perfectly still, his eyes locked on the man's hand. For a second, everything froze. The tall one was still on the ground, holding his wrist, the shorter one holding that piece of metal like it would save him. And me, standing there, soaked with rain, tired of the nonsense. And then, like every bad decision ever made, he stepped forward. Jet lunged, pulling me forward as I held his leash, barking loud enough to shake the windows. The man jumped back, dropping whatever he was holding, clattering to the ground. His eyes widened, fear flashing across his face. "Call your dog off!" he shouted, voice high, cracking. I didn't move. I didn't blink. "You can leave," I said calmly, "or you can stay and find out how bad your day can really get." He backed away, hands up, eyes darting between me, Jet, and his friend still groaning on the sidewalk. The tall one managed to get to his feet, leaning against the wall, breathing heavy. They looked at each other, then at me, then at Jet. And in that moment, they realized they weren't in control. They weren't the predators they thought they were. They were just two young men who made a choice to mess with the wrong woman on the wrong day. And me? I stood there, letting them see exactly who they tried to rob. A black woman who didn't flinch, didn't beg, and didn't step aside when pushed. They didn't know me, but now they were starting to. This is the climax. Everything you've been waiting for is right here. Stay to see how she put them in their place. You know what folks forget? Respect is a two-way street. These two found out the hard way. The taller one tried to stand, holding his wrist like it was the only thing keeping him upright, eyes darting like he was hoping for a crowd to save him. There was no crowd. Just me, Jet, and a street that's seen more stories than most folks care to admit. Jet was still, but his eyes never left them, chest rising and falling like a drum, ready if I let him loose. I took one step forward, just one, and you could see their confidence drop to the ground like that piece of metal they dropped earlier. "Look," the shorter one said, hands raised, shaking just enough to give away the truth. "We don't want trouble." I raised my eyebrows, sarcasm dripping like the rain off my jacket. "Funny. That's exactly what you came looking for." He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again, but no words came out. The taller one looked around like the street would swallow him if he stood still long enough. They wanted an easy win. They wanted someone who would cower, hand over everything, and shuffle away, pretending it didn't happen. That's not me. I knelt beside Jet, brushing my hand over his head, feeling his warmth calm the energy buzzing in my chest. I could hear my breath, slow, steady, while the world waited for what came next. "You boys have a choice," I said, looking them in the eye, my voice calm, the kind of calm that makes people nervous. "You can walk away, or you can see how far I'm willing to go to protect what's mine." The taller one swallowed hard, clutching his wrist, pain flashing across his face. The shorter one's hands were still in the air, shaking like leaves in the wind. He glanced at his friend, then back at me, eyes wide. "You don't get it, do you?" I stood up, the leash firm in my hand, Jet's eyes following my every move. "You think you can scare people like me? You think you can take from people like me? But you're not ready for what happens when we stand up." For a moment, the rain stopped, leaving the street with that quiet, only a city knows. A hush that feels like the world is holding its breath. They didn't say a word. They didn't move. And then, like two kids realizing they just poked the wrong bear, they turned and stumbled away, feet splashing through puddles, looking back every few steps like I was going to chase them. I didn't need to. I stood there, letting them see me, letting them understand that I wasn't afraid, that I wasn't going to forget, that I would remember their faces and the choices they made. Jet let out a low woof, almost like he was laughing, and I couldn't help but smile, despite the rain soaking through my clothes. I leaned down, rubbing his ears, feeling the steady thump of his tail against my leg. "Good boy," I whispered. We turned and walked down that street, the sidewalk cracked but steady under our feet, the world moving on like it always does, pretending it didn't just watch a black woman stand her ground. But I felt it. I felt every heartbeat, every breath, every drop of rain, and I felt alive in a way that only comes when you've faced down fear and made it blink first. When we reached Miss Lewis's house, I saw her in the window, her face full of questions she didn't ask. I raised my hand, giving her a wave, letting her know everything was fine, that the street was still safe, at least for now. I walked into my home, shaking off the rain, jet circling my legs, still ready, always ready. I made us a cup of tea, the steam rising like a promise, and sat on the floor with Jet, his head resting on my knee, his eyes closing, trusting that it was okay to sleep. And I sat there, letting the warmth of the tea and the weight of the moment settle in, knowing that no matter how many times the world tries to push you down, you have a choice. You can stand. And I will.